Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to learn how to make bias tape or bias binding. You may have heard it called seam binding as well. What is bias tape? I'm going to read the definition from Wikipedia. It says, it's a narrow strip of fabric cut on the bias. The strip's fibers being at 45 degrees to the length of the strip make it stretchier as well as more fluid and more drapable compared to a strip that is cut on the grain. Then these strips can be pieced together, as I'll show you in the video, and to make one continuous long tape. The tape's width can vary from a ½ inch to about 3 inches depending on the applications. Bias tape is used in making piping, binding seams, finishing raw edges, etc. It is often used on the edges of quilts, placemats, and bibs, around the armhole and neckline edges instead of a facing, and as a simple strap or tie for casual bags or clothing. So there are many applications for this technique that you're about to learn, and when you learn to make your own bias tape, then when you're making a garment, you can make it to exactly match it, and you can save money by not having to spend $3 or more to buy it at the fabric store, but you can make your own from leftover pieces of fabric as well. So stay tuned if you're interested in learning this technique of how to make your own bias tape at home. You will need a sewing machine and an iron and some fabric. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please comment below and let me know what was helpful to you about the video and what you maybe want to incorporate into your sewing routine. Happy sewing and enjoy. Hello, I'm working on a dress, and I thought I'd do a brief video on how you can make seam binding. So I have this piece of fabric that matches the print of my dress. A marking pin where the marks disappear when you iron it. You need a piece of fabric, and I'm gonna make 1/4 inch tape, so I'll be using 1 inch markings, and I'm gonna do it going this way because you see this is the way the fabric kind of stretches. So I'm just gonna mark up this whole piece of fabric with 1 inch marks. So as you can see, I've marked it all the way on the piece of fabric, and now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut out the strips. So now that I have all of my pieces cut out, I'm going to start assembling the bias tape. It's tricky, but it's not once you get used to it. So you face the fabric right side up is what I like to do, and then take another piece and face it so the right sides are together, and lay it on top of the other. And where you're gonna sew, I'm gonna mark it, is gonna be from this corner, like from this diagonal this way. So let me see. So I'm going to pin it first, and then I'm going to mark the stitching line. So you're going to stitch from here to here. So if you see, this is where I did my marks. And if you want, if you're not comfortable with those two lines to guide you as you sew, you can take your ruler, and with every piece that you're going to stitch together, you can mark the stitching line thusly. So you can make sure to do a straight seam, and these edges that are hanging outside, you can trim them later. So for the next piece, you take the piece that's on top, and then you bring it so its right side is up, and then you do the same thing. Take another piece and put it on top of that piece. And pin it first. And mark it. Then top piece, turn it so its right side is facing up. Put another piece on top. So now that we've pinned all of our pieces together, we have all this, which is going to become seam binding or bias tape, and you can use it to finish the necklines of garments. You can use it as a casing. You can use it to finish seams if you don't have a serger, or if you have a fabric that frays a lot. So now we are going to take it over to the sewing machine so that we can stitch along the lines that we marked. So we're at the sewing machine, and we have the mark from here to here. So I'm going to stitch on diagonal, back stitch, remove my pins as I go. Excuse my squeaky chair. And then at this point, you can take your scissors and cut the thread, but also I'm going to trim the excess fabric off. So then what you're left with is that edge, and then you see when I open it up, it aligns with the other piece. So after we stitch all of these, then we're going to press this flat. So now we've sewed all of our seams. We have this line, 1-inch piece of fabric that's continuous now. So now we're going to head over to the ironing board to iron the seams flat, and then I'll show you a couple of ways that you can make this 1-inch piece into a 1/4 inch seam binding. Alright, so let's press out these seams. I have my iron set to the cotton linen setting, since this is cotton fabric, so it has a high heat tolerance. You don't have to have the steam on, and then you just press them out. Alright, so that is the end of that. So, to make this into 1/4 inch seam binding, if you want to do it by hand without any extra gadgets, you can simply, I'm going to turn it this way, you can fold it in half. And then iron a crease into it. And then you can take that crease and use it as a guideline. So you fold this side to the crease, and then you can iron it down. And you'll do the same with the other side. Mind your fingers. That's why I turn the steam off, because I don't want the steam to burn my fingers. And then the same with the other side. Fold it inward. And then you can do that along the whole seam. You can do that along the whole piece, and then you fold it again on itself, and then you have your 1/4 inch binding kind of set in place, because where you're ironing it, where the creases are going to be kind of your guidelines for when you're stitching it onto the garment. You're going to stitch it in the seam, and then when you fold it on itself, these are already preset, and it helps too even when you're pinning it into place. So that is one way to do it. Now, another way is if you have a kit like this that has different size guides for you to make seam binding. This is the one that is for the side, the 1 inch, that's going to make it into a 1/4 inch. So you're going to feed the binding into the wide end, and then it's going to come out of the narrow end. to use the seam ripper to help guide it through. It's important when using this tool that the starting edge of your seam binding be on the diagonal, because it feeds through it better on the diagonal. So put it wrong side facing up into the large end, and then it may come out. See how it's starting to come out on its own, and as it comes out, it's folding it. So at this point, you want to keep your iron really close to the end so that you can like catch the folds and set them in place. So I'm gonna start here and just pull it back as I iron. Maybe half an inch, no more than an inch at a time is how I personally like to do. And see how it's making that first, so you don't have to fold it in half and fold it on itself. And then when you've done this the whole way down, then you can, if you need to, you can fold this on itself again and press it in place. And when you get to a part where you're getting to one of the seams that you've pressed out, make sure that it doesn't roll back on itself. Make sure the seam stays flat as you're feeding it through. Like here, we're about to get to this seam. So I want to be really close, but as it's going in, just make sure it doesn't get flipped up. And maybe when you're actually doing it over the seam, maybe hold the iron in place a few more seconds than with the other pieces, so that the heat can go through all the layers. So I'm using this seam by, I almost see how the seam tried to flip up on me, so I need to put it back down. It's a good thing this goes both ways, right? So if you make a little mistake, you can go back and like reset it. But I don't, for what I'm using this seam binding for, I don't have to fold it over to be the 1/4 inch, because I'm gonna use it to finish a V neckline on a dress, and also to be the casing for elastic. So it's fine like this, but I'm still gonna show you how you can just fold it on itself if you need it to have all the marks for the 1/4 inch. Yep, see, that wants to curl up and go the same way, but you have to press it down and bring it and keep ironing.